Hi YouTube, my name is Tyler. This is my YouTube channel and this is the third week of November reading vlog. So it's been a couple days since my last vlog. I've spent that time mostly reading. So I was reading I think 5 books at one point, so I really needed to focus and get some things read and finished, and I finished 2 books today. So I'll talk about those, and then I will talk about what I'm still working on, and then I'll update you on my Booktrovert bingo. And you might see me again later today. There is an audiobook I am listening to and I'm close to finishing, but it's like an awkward length of time that it just kind of depends on what I end up getting into this evening, whether or not I will finish it today. So I didn't want to like hold off on filming this clip in hopes of finishing that audiobook. So let's talk about the books I finished. The first book I finished today was Dementia 21. This was the second volume of this. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I didn't like it quite as much as the first one. This one is the last one, so it tried to kind of tie it together into like one story kind of, and it brought back a lot of the characters and stories from like previous stories, which like was fine, but surprisingly I liked it more when it was just like a bunch of individual stories, which is a rarity for me. But I think because this is so surreal and absurd that the kind of like monster of the week style standalone chapters worked a little bit better for me in this style. But it wasn't bad. I had a good time. There was still some interesting things in this one. I just didn't like it as much as the first one. The other book I finished today was by Julia Shaw, The Hidden Culture, History, and Science of Bisexuality. This also was 4 stars. Enjoyed this. I won't say like it was some profound or amazing read, but I enjoyed it. It was easy enough to read. It definitely had me thinking about my own bisexuality and how specifically, there's like a lot of, she talks a lot about how in society bisexuality is like hypersexualized, especially for women. And it just kind of had me thinking about how I came to terms with my asexuality way before I came to terms with my bisexuality. And I think part of it had to do with that hypersexualization that we see in society of bisexual women. So I think it made it harder for me to see that bisexuality in myself. And like, she doesn't talk about asexuality specifically in this book, but the conversations about hypersexuality in this book had me thinking about that. So I enjoyed it. I would recommend it. It's a pretty easy read. It took me a while to read, but that's mostly because I was reading like 3 trillion books at one time, and I was having to decide. I really could only read like 3 books a day, like a bit of 3 books a day. So sometimes was not one of the books that I picked up for the day. So there was that. But overall, enjoyed it. Thought it was good. There were some interesting things in there. One thing that really, in the beginning of the book, talks about how the word heterosexual was coined by a gay man as a byproduct of coming up with the word homosexual, which I thought was really interesting. And also kind of ties into the dawn of everything, how like these almost evolutionary arguments that like heterosexuality is normal or the way, the correct way evolutionarily for humans to pair off and mate. Was really interesting too. Like it didn't get super deep into it. It wasn't quite the argument of like the dawn of everything, but like having read the dawn of everything before reading that just kind of got my brain working in interesting ways. So I don't know, if it interests you, I would say pick it up. Like there wasn't anything bad about it, but it's only like 180 pages, not counting like the notes at the end. So it's a really easy and quick read. So there is that. And with reading those, I have hit a bingo. Technically there's a bingo down here, but I haven't actually finished the Basic 8 yet, but I know for sure that book is finished, so I'll talk about that bingo when I actually finish the Basic 8. But anyways, so starting here and going down, group effort. This was hit by the dawn of everything because 2 people wrote that book. The Gen X one is still The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. Keep It Cozy, Dementia 21, Volume 2, because I mostly read that in cozy environments. Finished it in my sweatshirt and sweatpants and cozy socks. Found in Translation, Dementia 21, the first volume, because it is a manga, so it was originally in Japanese. And then Something Borrowed, which was Still Rock Collector from last month. So that is that bingo. Glad I finally hit another one. I feel like it's been a little bit. I will talk about the books that I am still currently reading. First, I'll start with a soft DNF. I checked out American Psycho, and I feel like I mentioned it in the last vlog. So I'm just checking in to say I won't be finishing that. I just could not get into it. And I think part of it is like I'm struggling with ebooks lately. I keep checking out ebooks because I want something mobile that I can read like somewhere other than the living room where I keep my physical books. But I just like have not been able to like get myself to focus on reading stuff digitally recently. So I ended up DNFing it, but I put it back on my want to read list to try at some later time. I'm also currently reading The Basic 8, which I talked about, which I mentioned in the booktrovertbingo section. This is a reread. This is one of my all-time favorite books, and I usually read it in November. So yeah, I'm reading that. It's going along just fine. I love that book. So there's that. I am listening to Herland by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. That was a book that I picked up the recommendation from a podcast called Nice Try. They did a series about utopias, and Herland is about a utopian country that only women live in, and they produce parthenogenically, so like they don't need a male to produce offspring. And there is a group of men who have wandered into this society, and so I'm listening to that as an audiobook. I really liked The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So it seemed interesting enough, and I'll talk more about it when I finish it, which may be tonight. And then I'm also reading The Topeka School by Ben Lerner. This again is an ebook that I picked up after DNFing American Psycho. I keep seeing this book like everywhere. I almost bought it at the bookstore like multiple times in the last year. And it's just been tagged on Libby for ages. And it was like the only book that was actively available at my library when I was like searching Libby for something to read after DNFing American Psycho. So I just went ahead and checked it out. I don't have any thoughts about it yet, but it's under 300 pages. So I think it will be easy enough to read. Anyways, so this was a really long update for the first vlog check-in. I'm not really sure what this week will look like because I'm a couple days behind. I'm 3 days behind on starting this vlog. So I'm not really sure what that means for the rest of this vlogging schedule, but we'll see. I'm glad I got 2 books done and finished. Anyways, I might see you tonight. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye! Hello! It is November 18th, and I have just finished listening to Herland by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This was a serialized novel that was like published serially in 1915, and it is a utopian novel about a society, a nation of only women. And this group of 3 men discover this country and live in this country of only women for like a year or something. And it is definitely very utopian. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars, so it got rounded up to 4. I liked it fine enough, but it's definitely very like white feminist. It's definitely a product of its time, 1915. There's definitely some interesting things of where these men are like having to grapple with seeing women as humans that they weren't doing in their regular lives, but it really just doesn't get deep enough into it for me. There was very little plot in this, like so little. There's like one big event that happens. This book is like 100 years old, so I'm just gonna go ahead and spoil it. So skip ahead, I guess, if you don't want spoilers. But one of the men tries to rape his wife, and there is a court case, trial. It takes place over like 2 pages. Like there is no, there's like a little bit of foreshadowing that like Terry's gonna do something bad, but there's like no plot really. This is just like, it is told from the perspective of Van Jennings, one of the men, and he's talking about this year that they spent in Herland, and it's mostly just like explaining what their society is, and like just like a lot is not happening. So part of it is just like the way it's written. It's like interesting enough, but like there's no plot, so like it is not like super engaging for me as a person that's like typically enjoys a plot. And then there's the dated aspect of it. There was definitely some like eugenics shit in this book, which I was not a fan of. Did not like that. And like it was seen seemingly in a positive light because it was the Herlanders talking about like how they breed their children to be better the next generation, and how they decide who should have children and things like that, which I was just like, oh, that's nasty. That's gross. I hate that. And so like, because it is so old, it was kind of hard sometimes to decide whether this was something that was being challenged or if it was something that was being heralded as a positive, because the society, it's described as a utopian novel, and the society is supposed to be a utopia of all women. There's no war, there's no like no poverty, no like starvation, nothing like that is happening in Herland. So we're supposed to see Herland as like this utopian society, but then they're like practicing eugenics basically, and like they're I don't know. So like I see that as a negative thing, but I don't think it was supposed to be seen as a negative thing. There's also some like weird kind of like gender essentialist stuff that was going on both sides of the equation, from like the men and from the women, about like what women are. Like they're super focused on motherhood, which like kind of makes sense because they asexually create children without men. And so I get to a point why there is like a focus on motherhood in this society. But at the same time, it did really come off as kind of just like, women be mothers. Even if this was supposed to be like a utopian society. And there was also, shoot, I keep like grasping onto an idea as I'm talking out another idea and then forgetting it by the time I finish my thought. Hello, I am in the midst of editing this vlog right now, and while doing that I realized there was one other thing that I meant to talk about and just kept losing the thread, and that was that seemingly none of these women form romantic relationships with each other. So part of the whole thing is them needing to decide on who should marry these men and reintroduce fatherhood to the society. And they talk about how they don't have any of the knowledge of what it takes to be a wife, or what that means, or why they would want to live in homes together with just them and their wives and things like that. And I just thought it was very weird that, like, in the thousands of years, I think it was like 2,000 years since men had left the society, there wasn't any lesbian relationships whatsoever. No pairing off at all between women, and they didn't know what to expect in a relationship with another person. I don't know. I found it to be odd. So I wanted to squeeze that in right here because I did mean to mention it and I just forgot it. So, yeah. But there was also like this section where it's like they were breeding cats and like, it was like this whole section about like the men, we have dogs in America, and then in her land they have cats. And I just thought it was kind of funny, but also like absurd that like this nation of women would only have cats. Anyways, there was that, but then there was one thing that like really busted me up. At two separate points, they talk about how many pockets that the women's garments have, and like in the second time where they talk about like how well produced they are, and there's like so many of them in all their garments, and they fit the hand just perfectly. And I just thought it was so funny because like even in 1915, women were still like obsessed with having pockets in their garments and just like needing pockets all the time. So those were two kind of funny things. You know, the cat one was a little sillier, and I it seemed absurd that we would be like saying women would only have cats. They would never have any need or desire for a dog. And then the pockets thing was funny because it's still something I relate to in 2022. Yeah, so those are kind of my thoughts on Herland. I didn't have like a bad time, but it is definitely like a product of its time, and stuff to keep in mind if you decided to read this. Oh, the other thing, there's definitely some racist stuff in there. The constant use of the word savage in Savages to talk about like uncivilized people, not good. And seemingly the whole society is like all white women. And as far as I can tell, all the men were white. So like, it's a pretty lily white book. And like, it's not great in that way either. So, again, 1915, can't be too surprised. Stuff to keep in mind if you wanted to read this book. I think I've said that 3 times now. But overall, had a decent time reading it, listening to it. It was just kind of an interesting little read, and I picked it up just because I had listened to a podcast that had a season on utopias. Anyways, so that's my thoughts. I just realized I didn't do my bingo board, so I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna go do that, and I might be back momentarily with a bingo update. I'm not sure if this would actually hit a bingo or not, but we shall see. All right, bye. Hi, I'm back. I did not get a bingo with Herland. However, in checking if it fit any of these prompts, I discovered that Charlotte Perkins Gilman was like an actual eugenicist and incredibly racist. And so that was not just like accidental eugenics vibes in Herland. That was like actual eugenics philosophy. So yeah, I don't know, maybe you don't want to read this. Yeah, not great. She's very, very dead at this point. So, she's not going to get any money if you decide to read this book. But it's probably something that's worth knowing before picking it up. Anyways, I just thought I would put that little note in here in case that was something you were interested in reading. All right, bye. Howdy, it is November 20th, and I have just finished listening to In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. 5 stars. I started this yesterday, listened to the first half yesterday, listened to the back half today. Wow, 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 wow. I meant to prepare for this a little better, but I just walked down here after feeding the dog and I forgot to prepare. So I'll just read you the book description from Goodreads because it's short. It says, for years, Carmen Maria Machado has struggled to articulate her experiences in an abusive same-sex relationship. In this extraordinarily candid and radically inventive memoir, Machado tackles a dark and difficult subject with wit, inventiveness, and inquiring spirit, as she uses a series of narrative tropes, including classic horror themes, to create an entirely unique piece of work, which is destined to become an instant classic. And I would say, yeah, that's really what this is. It is a memoir, but also there are looks into domestic violence against women, domestic violence within a lesbian and queer relationships. There are like more academic lenses of looking at media, whether that's books or like film. And there's something about Carmen Maria Machado's writing that just really works for me. She's also very into like the not trope, but like the haunted house trope is the only word I can think of, but she's very into that, and that is like infused through this. And I also tend to really enjoy a haunted house vibe. This just absolutely really blew me out of the water. I mean, it isn't about an abusive relationship. There's like maybe one scene of like physical abuse, but this is like almost exclusively like mental and emotional abuse. But it's still like heavy. And I'm not saying to make that that it's a less abusive relationship. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you are sensitive specifically to physical abuse, that's not what this kind of abusive relationship is. It's just a really good, really intense but good read. Like I said, 5 stars. I listened to the audiobook, and it's narrated by Carmen Maria Machado, and I just absolutely love her voice as well, so that contributed to like how much I enjoyed this. I'm probably gonna buy a copy of it for myself, maybe buy a copy of the audiobook too. I don't know, like it's just it's a really good book. I can't really say who this book is for. It is not like a straightforward memoir. It's not like this is our relationship, and it's more or less told chronologically, but not really. And there's just like little vignettes. There's little like sections that like aren't necessarily about the relationship, but like little stories that kind of contribute to the theme, or like the point she's trying to get across. It is definitely very inventive. It is not just like a regular memoir, but I loved it. And I will say, there was stuff about queer history too, not necessarily related to domestic violence, but like how women in queer stories can be erased from time, can be erased from history. The stories of queer people and women, and I don't know, there were some parts of it in the back half that just were really hitting me heavy today. There was a shooting at a LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs. I lived in Colorado Springs for a number of years. And so listening to some of those bits and pieces were just really hitting me. So yeah, I don't know who this book is for, but if any of this sounds interesting to you, or if you have liked Carmen Maria Machado's work in the past, I would probably recommend it. But anyways, I have rambled enough about this. I have to check bingo and stuff. I'm not gonna do that tonight though, so I will talk to y'all either tomorrow or in the future. I don't know. Greetings. It is November 21st and I'm currently editing this vlog I'm recording right now. And I realized I didn't come on here and tell you that I DNF'd the Topeka School by Ben Larimer, something. I ended up DNFing this. I read like, I don't know, like 40 pages maybe, and it was such a fight to read this book, and I did not know what the hell was going on. And I couldn't tell you if that was because of the way the book was written or like I just could not get myself to read more than like 2 pages of this book at a time. So obviously I was not like holding on to any information. So I ended up DNFing it. This was a book that I had tagged on Libby for ages. And I kept putting it off because I just couldn't tell if it was actually going to be something I liked or not. And I went ahead and just like untagged it. I don't think it was actually on my TBR on Goodreads. Like that was how uncertain of this book I was. And it's a real true DNF. I don't think I'm going to try to read this book ever again. Unless, I don't know, unless Kayla reads it and loves it or something. Yeah, it's done for me. But I just thought I would check in because I apparently mentioned it in this vlog. So I will talk to y'all later. Bye. Greetings. It is November 23rd and I realized I needed to end the vlog today. I almost completely forgot about it. There has just been so much going on. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving. So there's just like lots of chaos. So I'll tell you the books I read this week and then I'll close out the vlog. I read 4 books this week, so I'm back reading 4 books a week apparently. I read Dementia 21 Volume 2. I gave that 4 stars by Shintaro Kagu. By The Hidden Culture, History and Science of Bisexuality by Julia Shaw, 4 stars. Herland by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, 4 stars. And In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, 5 stars. Obviously a really good reading week as well. My favorite book this week was definitely In the Dream House. My least favorite, probably Herland. Yeah, pretty good little chunk of books right there. I really need to edit this vlog. I'm actually doing Thanksgiving on Saturday this week, which is usually when I do like my big editing push, and this vlog is actually quite long. So I'm hoping this video gets out at the right time, but it may be late. Is there anything else I have to say? Oh, I'm currently reading 3 books. The Basic 8 by Daniel Handler. This is a reread. Just making my way through it. I'm only reading a little bit at a time just because I have a lot of other stuff that's been going on. No More Police. This is a nonfiction book about abolishing the police, defunding the police, stuff like that. This is pretty dense, so I'm reading it really slow. I looked for an audiobook today. Unfortunately, none of my libraries had an audiobook, so I guess I'm going to keep reading this very slowly. And then I am also reading Night Crawling. I'm reading this digitally on my phone. It's going fine. I think I'm like 40% in, somewhere around there. So I'll probably finish it early next week. Yeah, that's really all I have to say at the end of this vlog. Thanks for watching. Bye.